Welcome back to another episode of Discovering Disruptions in Tech. As always, I'm your host, Howard Holton, and I'm here with Richard, Field CTO for NetApp in Cloud.
Good afternoon.
How are you today?
I'm doing great, thank you. It's day 3 of reInvent, so you can imagine it's always a busy week.
Yes. By day 3, the gas tank starts to get a little empty.
Yes, and with the adjustment from East Coast time as well.
Sure.
It's there is always more caffeine that's needed later.
That is true. That is true. At least we're in a place where they have no water, but they have plenty of caffeine on tap, apparently.
Yeah, and no daylight, no going outside,
right,
no
right.
nothing.
So your role is interesting, and what NetApp is doing is interesting because unlike most tech vendors, your journey looks very much like your customer's journey.
Yeah.
Right? And your role kind of fits really well into the same thing the same decision process, the same kind of work, or similar to what customers are kind of going through themselves, right? NetApp is a traditional tech innovation vendor, but they're making a transition to becoming a cloud vendor.
Yes.
Right? And so you're moving from, I think about infrastructure, I think about data centers, I think about power, heat, cooling, to I think about software, I think about scalability, I think about acceleration, I think about innovation, I think about agility. I really have to focus on reducing tech debt because I don't get the ability to add free hardware behind it anymore.
Totally, and I think it's a really interesting journey to actually look at what it takes from a mindset and from a business perspective as well. It's like the technology's fantastic. We'll talk more about the great technology, all the things we've done, how wonderful it is. But what I find fascinating is how it drives change in behavior, how it drives change in what you're doing. So we're NetApp, and we have a very strong early in career program where we take recent college grads, some people who are veterans who are coming out of the forces and looking for new careers, all sorts of people returning to work. And I've been really lucky. That program is based out of our Raleigh campus in North Carolina, where I'm based, and so I've been able to be part of the sponsorship team for that. And a huge number of those employees come through my teams. But it's always a great discussion because you have this raw material to work with. They're very early in career.
Right.
They don't know better. And I was explaining to them one day. So I've been at NetApp 25 years almost. So I've been everything from the customer side through the junior ranks of the systems engineering team and now to my current role in the cloud team. But we fondly, in the tech world, we love our hardware. People stroke it. They have to have, it's like I just spent $1 million on this thing. I need to see something for it. The lights have got to blink in the right color. I've got to have the right, all of those things. So we, for many years, have had this thing we call the hardware universe poster. It's A3 size, giant poster people lovingly give to their customers. And it's a picture of everything that we sell with a SKU. It's like cables and I don't even know half of them. Disks, SSDs, everything is on this thing. And I explain it when I talk to the team. I'm like, my role as a systems engineer was to really thoroughly understand this. My background's in geography. I love maps. I'm going to focus on this. This is a map. This is how we do things. I said, but my job would be to say, Howard, I want to talk to you about NetApp. And you'd be like, okay, how much does a NetApp cost? I'd be like, depends. Which one do you want? Do you want the big one or the small one? Do you want the fast, the slow? What about the HA? And then we've got this entire language we've created as IT professionals. We're going to do 6 nines resilience. It's everything proof. So we do all of this, and we spend 6 or 9 months going through all of your requirements. Is it going to solve world hunger, make good espresso, figure out disaster recovery, all of these different things that we put in there. And at the end of it, I'm going to decode this giant poster to a bill of materials this big for you. And then the sales rep will lovingly price it and negotiate discounts. And then I can answer that question with Howard. Yes. The NetApp you want, your NetApp costs you this much. And in the cloud, it's on a web page.
Right.
10 cents. Should we talk about what you're going to do with it now? Let's talk about the agility. Let's think. And it's
a distinctly different conversation.
It's
right? Because you go from here's the crunchy bits necessary to put together a configuration that is going to operate in the way that we've agreed to define how it should operate, right? I would say the way you want, but most customers, I don't think actually know what they want. They just know kind of what they did yesterday and if that worked, and and kind of what they were told, and you know what I mean? Like we're not.
Well, let me.
We're not
So,
wicked
do you
introspective,
remember the old days of flexible IT and agile IT?
but- Sure.
So somebody asked me, like, okay, best definition would be, you're going to spend, I don't know, $2 million on this asset. You'll depreciate it over 4 or 5 years probably, because your CFO will decide how it doesn't matter what the useful life is, you'll be told what the useful life is. And I can guarantee that at some point during the useful life of that product, somebody's going to come to you and ask you to do something you didn't expect. And then, depending how you answer that question, will define whether you have flexible IT or agile IT. So if you answer yes, and I can do it tomorrow, you are both flexible and agile. If the answer is, well, it's probably going to take us $1 million in 6 months, then you're neither flexible nor agile. And that's the mindset that people are living in. You're trying to second guess constantly what might come down the road that you can't see. So you look,
Sure.
we built a perfection. I need to do 300 things, and there's 400 more that I think are coming. I'm making such a big investment decision. When you go to the cloud and infrastructure as a service, you're renting it by the hour, there's no penalty to change your mind. It's like, you know what, I tried it, didn't work, I'll move on.
But you have to be in the mindset of agility. Like you have to be in the mindset of, it's okay to say my business today isn't my business from 2 years ago,
True.
and therefore
True.
it's okay to make different decisions.
True.
That's a really hard thing for people to do. The number of times I go to my team and I go, hey, we're reviewing the ERP. And they go, no, but that's my ERP. No, your decision was made 14 years ago. And is the company the same as it was 14 years ago? And they go, no. Are you the same that you were 14 years ago? No. Why would you then think that was the decision from 14 years ago is the right decision today? It may be, but why don't we validate it?
That's a big piece. I think I spend a lot of time questioning. It's interesting, it goes back to what you were saying about the way we assess hardware. I remember writing down in my notebook on my first day as part of the sales organization at NetApp, it's like, there's 3 conversations. What is it? What's it for? And why do you care? And when you evaluate, I spend a lot of time looking at our internal storyboards, but I look at the industry. Tech companies are really good about what is it. It's amazing. It goes like 300 miles an hour. It's all amazing. Occasionally you get to here's what it's for. It's going to change your business because you're going to be, But to really drill down to that, why do you care? I think that's the one that both the tech companies struggle with, but also the customers. Particularly when I talk to execs and I talk to my customer base, they intrinsically know they need to do something, but being able to articulate the why, does it make things, faster, cheaper? I mean, value props in three angles: time, risk, and money primarily. Doesn't matter whether you're internal or external.
For sure.
It's I want to make some money, I want to make it faster, reduce my risk. That's obviously the big one mostly at the moment. But when you do those, being able to really drill down and articulate that why is very, very hard. And I think that's where, I spend a lot of time asking, well, why are we doing that? The corollary is, doing the same thing tomorrow as you do today and expecting a different result is the definition of madness.
Definition of insanity.
Insanity, yeah. So I'm very, we all want to be growth businesses. No one comes along and says, yeah, we're a value business. We're all going to grow. We're all going to take share. But then the question I ask my teams is like, okay, what are we doing differently?
Right.
It's like you're not getting twice as many people. The products are incrementally better. So what are we going to do differently? We're going to change the way, how are we going to engage? And the same is true for every customer. It's about that understanding that, there's different levers to pull, but driving change is hard. And I think that's where I see a lot of the customers who've been very aggressive in cloud have leaned in. The original adage was, it's cost. It was never about cost.
Not one time.
And then also it's about agility. And that's true. But I think what it is about driving change, because you force the issue. You get the agility that you need, but you can only do that by forcing the issue. You said, CIOs are, it's notorious. You set this great big unmatchable goal of like, we want to get to, 100% in the cloud in 18 months. So if you get 40% there in 18 months, did you win or fail? Was it succeed or fail? You can look at it both ways. You could argue that, hey, 40% seems really, really good with the applications you had to move and everything else. If you'd set a goal of 20%, no one would have done anything. You wouldn't have driven that emphasis on change.
That's true.
When you light the fire under people and you give them that really big, aggressive goal, you're going to drive the creativity, you're going to drive the thought processes. And it's an interesting
But you
thing.
have to be
know,
willing to acknowledge that it's also an unattainable goal,
Um,
and know what is
Yeah.
like what is good, so you can celebrate the good with your team, so that when they kill themselves to get to 60%, because they
That's
will,
the big
then
piece
you're
that I
able to
think.
go, okay, guys, now here's the big secret. I was actually really hoping for 40. You made 60. That's fantastic. I knew 100% wasn't going to happen, but I needed everyone to be motivated. I needed everyone to be on the same page. I needed everyone to drive to the same goal. Fantastic, everybody did it. Let's celebrate the win and then complete the other
Definitely
40%.
the trick that I worry, or that's the trick in all of this, is I think the goals have to be aggressive but achievable. And you're right that if we get this wrong, I heard it described best by a team. Somebody, I don't know, one time said something and said, well, in the model you just described, it's like, hey, it's like trying to do the pole vault.
Right.
We set the bar at 10 feet and we didn't clear it, so we're going to set the bar at 12 feet and take another run at it.
Right.
And everybody
Right.
constantly feels in that kind of, so you want to build that culture of success. You need to be able to feel the steps to progress and not penalize and say we failed, because you're right. And it is a fine line with those big goals where sometimes people feel like, look, we just turned in a performance that would win the World Cup, and we got beat down for it. And I think we do have to keep those two things in perspective.
It's so there's a thing in Moneyball that I think is appropriate, right? The Oakland Athletics under Billy Beane, every year had the second lowest budget, and every year made the playoffs. They never won, but every year they made the playoffs. And Billy Beane would not watch the playoffs; he would just leave. Why? Because we knew we weren't going to win. We're the second lowest paid, lowest budgeted team in baseball. Getting to the playoffs is such a monumental win that no one knows how the heck we got there, because not everybody does.
Yep.
And almost everybody that doesn't get there has more money than we do.
So that's already success.
Right? So that's already a massive success. And that's part of the thing. And when you're looking at, like, here's the maturity of my organization, here's the maturity of my team, here's the like where we are on a modernization scale from an operating model standpoint, and you're like, well, we're a decade and a half behind, you're like playing at the high school varsity level. When your team then puts in a major league appearance, you don't penalize them because they didn't win the World Series.
Yes. And I think that's that perspective that you need in all of this, is how do you, innovation is kind of an interesting one for me. And I talk to CIOs and CTOs about this. It's like every organization has an innovation budget. And it could be 2 hours a week per person, it could be 40 hours a week. The question is, and I did, this came out of my background. I did a lot of work with the early cloud companies, the service providers. And technology-wise, we sort of looked at it that you could almost draw a line at the hypervisor. Everything below the line was infrastructure as a service. Everything above the line, is in the application space. And that same line actually works really well when you look at it from an innovation angle. It was brought home to me. I was working with one of the early cloud companies, and we talked to the software team, and it's like, well, you should automate all the storage. We're a storage company. Automate it. It's going to be fabulous. And they were like, no, you don't get it. They had, at the time, their business model was hosted VMware.
Okay.
So their entire dev team was focused on things that were above the line. So every time they could put a feature above the line into user space, and a user clicked on it, they paid them $1.
Okay.
So you could draw a clear line. It's like every time they automated storage, whoever was the storage person
lost a bunch of money.
Well, it wasn't so much loss of money. It was saving them time. So it was good for operational efficiency, maybe margin.
Sure.
Your service provider, you've got three levers. You've got your revenue growth and market share. You've got your cost of goods and margin, and then you also have your customer experience that you want to focus on. So those three axes. So you draw that line at the hypervisor. Above the line, market and revenue growth. Below the line, operating margin and COGS. And the discussion we had was, they were like, look, we're not interested in something that makes us more efficient, because we're in a land grab in the market.
Sure.
Our goal right now as a company is to get customers, to get share, to get big. Once that cycle pivots, and the cycle then is about efficiency, well, now you can look at below the line. But when you look at this move to cloud, what you're basically saying is, if I have an innovation budget as a CIO in my team, do I want them spending it on infrastructure stuff below the line? Or do I want to spend those innovation cycles they have on making the business grow faster with new capabilities? And I think that's where that whole drive to cloud, drive to change comes from. It's the age-old adage, just because you could do it doesn't mean you should.
Sure.
And lots of organizations, for many years, they say, well, we can build our own, service stack. We can build our own. It's like, I'm sure you can.
Sure.
But when you look at your CIO, why? Is that really the best use of your intellectual property and understand your business? And I think that shit, I've used that all the time, the above the line, below the line. It's revenue margin, and then we've got to talk about customer experience.
And the reality is, I totally agree with you. The below the line has to be good enough that it is reliable and scalable to the scale that you need it to be. And not really anymore.
And there is no just-in-time in corporate IT. It's like we have to build to peak. We have to build to every eventuality. And it's funny when I look at the cost models and people are like, well, cloud is more expensive. It's you're renting it by the hour and you can give it back. If you commit to it, you'll get a really good price.
Sure, but you also have to commit to an operating model that allows you to embrace that flexibility. Otherwise, like if you just like I'm running cloud the same way I ran my data center. Same process, same operating model, same procedures, same everything. Yeah, it's going to be way more expensive. But you've also missed the point. The point wasn't to outsource your data center and your infrastructure cabinets to someone else. That's obviously going to be more expensive because they have to make money too. Right? The point was to have a new operating model that much more closely matched how your business actually operates.
Yes.
But in order to do that, you have to change the IT operating model to match the business operating model. And you really have to think about, what does my business do to make money? How are we profitable? How are we going to grow? How are we going to move? And how does IT support that?
And we have the same in NetApp. We started this discussion with the cloud journey. What does it look like to be a cloud company in NetApp? And so, yes, traditionally, we've been through this whole thing. You understand how much the NetApp is going to cost. You make a commitment to NetApp. You say, I am going to buy this beautiful piece of hardware that's $1 million, and I'm going to put it in my data center and lovingly care and feed it for the next 5 years. But there's an exchange of contracts at that point. You have made a commitment to NetApp. You pay us the money up front, and then we work with you to realize value on that asset. You could leave it 80% empty for the next 5 years, and that's on you. That's like with the cloud. What we're finding is that I'll go through that same exercise. So instead of the discussion we were talking about before, where it's like, how much does a NetApp cost? That's on the webpage. I can tell you that straight away.
Right.
There's some wrinkles about effective with cool technologies, but in general, the price is public. So then we start talking about how we're going to use it. And you're interested in, we're going to do SQL Server databases in Amazon on whatever it is. And at the end of it, we work as a team. We prove this out, and you're convinced. And the commitment you make to me is you say, yes, okay then.
Right.
And at that point, as an organization, particularly being part of our business model, we don't have anything that commits you to that. So when I look at what this means for our business and our business cycle, think about what a CRM normally looks like. So you have a traditional sales cycle in a CRM, and it says, prospecting, qualify, some form of validation event, negotiation, close one. Well, that closed one comes when the commitment happens, which is when the commitment happens is when you give us a purchase order. In the cloud, your commitment is verbal. It's yes. Right. There is nothing, so I can't mark it closed one because we haven't got any money at this point.
For sure.
And what we've seen in many cases with infrastructure and cloud is that what happens is that we'll see a sort of an arc where it's like during testing and validation, you're spending money because you're testing it. And then when you actually make the decision, the spending stops.
Right.
So we see the inverse of the traditional model. The traditional model, we get our money at the commitment. Now I could lose money at the commitment.
Right.
And then we have a working project for, weeks, months, could be up to 9, 12 months for customers with big migrations, where they're going to start materially ramping.
Yeah, you see a step cycle, right?
Yeah.
You kind of.
And we've now got to be able to understand how to track that. The leading indicators in our business have to change because, the things that are growing this quarter are applications and engagements where the customer said yes to us 3, 4, 5 months ago.
For sure.
So that time dilation, traditionally the last couple of weeks of the quarter, someone's going to give you a purchase order. It's all very. Now we could have, we had a customer a few years ago did a big Oracle Exadata migration into Azure, and We did all of the testing and validation in the December, and it was October the following year when they'd finally negotiated the contracts. Their GSI was in place to start their migration planning, build up their pre-prod environments, and get going. We had 9 months of no revenue from a committed customer.
Right.
And so it's changing the way we have to think. It's changing the thing that really excites me at the moment about it is just the inverse mindset. So if you think in a traditional hardware business, the most important day of the financial year is always the last day of the quarter.
For sure. Last day of the year.
Last day of the year. In a consumption world and in cloud, the most important day of the year is the first day of the year. Because it's based on the number of days of cumulative billing. So if you pay
for sure.
$100 a day...
For sure. My potential to capture revenue will never exceed my potential on the first day of the year.
Yes.
Because I have 365 days of daily billing.
Yes.
To be able to
so
capture.
The customer that I close on the last day of the year gives me 1 day of billing.
Correct. It's the least valuable.
It's the least
customer.
valuable and the least material in impact to my business.
Right.
So now we've got to completely invert the model. Now we have to change everybody's mindset and thinking in a completely new way. And this is what really drives me getting up in the morning is how do we think differently about this? How do we? I actually feel that we can drive new levels of predictability in a good way.
For sure.
Because the law of large numbers comes in, you can statistically model this. Machine learning will give you the trend lines. And you'll see the ebbs and flows, but you over time will see, the trend line. And you can follow the trend line. But yeah, that whole mindset for a salesperson now that things that happen late in the quarter have minimum impact to your results versus early in the quarter is 180 degrees the inverse of the traditional business model.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
It's a completely new mindset.
For sure. But shouldn't it also change the relationship that the sales team has with the customer? Like, shouldn't they start to become much more involved in what we would consider post-sales customer success?
Absolutely.
Right.
And I think we've seen a real change in how we're actually building those organizations. We piloted a number of things in my team because we're closest to it. One of the things we find in these kind of models in consumption, the technology team are very much more important. Because the customer, there's no negotiation, particularly in our as a cloud company, the majority of our business, we're working through Amazon, Azure, and Google. And in that model, it's their customer, their product, their pricing, their contract. So I don't have a salesperson that's going to go out and negotiate a price.
For sure.
So that's a fundamental scope change for a salesperson. It's like in the old world, your job is to go and work with procurement and negotiate and don't have any of that.
I went through thousands of those. I fully understand.
Don't have any.
Not as a salesperson, but as a customer,
Yes.
right?
Don't have any of that now. Now it's like, hey, you have an EDP, you have a Mac in place, you have you bought the gift card for the cloud. Now we have to understand how you're going to use it. And so we found that we spend a lot of time on, instead of in the infrastructure world in the data center, you do things as a box.
It's all front loaded, right?
But it's also the idea is if you've spent $1 million on this thing, you're going to use it for everything.
Yeah.
In the cloud, it's a different business model because it's workload by workload. So you may have a workflow which comprises 4 or 5 workloads, and you have to compete individually for each one.
Correct.
You may not by default get it. So we've had to change the way we do things. It's a very workload-centric approach now to actually build expertise around different capabilities, whether it's VMware migrations, database,
For sure.
HPC. So we're very specific and workload focused.
It very much matches like a data and analytics sale.
Yeah.
Right. Where the goal is to find a place where you can create a hero, so that you can gain the trust that you can do the things you say you do, so that someone else will then show up and go, hey, I kind of want to be a hero too. Right. So that those two then bring 2 more back, who then bring 2 more back, who then bring 2 more back. Right. Which means the sales team needs to be much more involved. If the salesperson knocks on my door at the beginning of the 3-year commit, and then knocks on my door at 2 years, 9 months, and 17 days, and goes, hey, let's talk about that 3-year commit, I'm going to go, no, because what I thought I was going to do, I didn't do because I'm not bound to do it, right? I don't have an exabyte of empty storage that I have to use over 3 years that I'm paying for, right? Yep. Instead, I'm paying for what I use, and you didn't come back to say, hey, you didn't show me the value, you didn't continue to carry that. But if you do, then you become my partner to help me displace other workloads that would likely go on other storage, but because I've shown and built that trust in this kind of joint venture of cloud and the decision that we made, the rest of the business is like, look, it's so much easier to do what you've done because you've already proven it, and I don't have to go reprove it.
And I think it brings into it so many different parameters that you have in that virtuous circle, but it really comes back to what you were saying about customer success and the change. So if we go back to that engagement cycle, the commitment is verbal.
For sure.
We say yes. What I want, sales teams by definition is persuading somebody to do something they inherently didn't want to do, otherwise it's fulfillment. So
that's true. That's 100% correct.
So you're essentially saying, hey, we're going to work through, we're going to prove to you. We gains that commitment. That's what I feel is the job of my technical specialists in the pre-sales organization. At that point, I want customer success to be seamlessly working with the customer through their deployment plans, their engagement, their optimizations.
Right.
It's that ebb and flow that says we've got to match the customer's need. And what we've seen, a classical SaaS model follows almost to the hardware model. You make let's make a 12-month commitment, buy a contract for 100 units, and then at the end of it, we try and do the renew, all the things you do. What we found is that the pay-go business is terrifying up front. Every company's like, oh my goodness, it's like, but it's inherently honest.
Right.
People only use it if they need it.
Correct.
And
so if I keep my commitment, you'll keep your commitment. If you keep your commitment, I'll keep my commitment. And it's this like cyclical thing that requires everyone to show up. But the second you don't show up, I have the ability to go, well, this was the wrong decision, and I can escape as rapidly as I possibly can.
And what we're finding is that the technical competence, one of the things I talk a lot to our customer success team and our customer success leaders as well, back to that questioning and why. It's like, are we doing this for our success, or are we doing this for the customer's success? Because so oftentimes the two get very confused, perhaps is the best way.
Yes.
Someone says, like, well, I need customer success to drive all of the cross-sell of all these other products. I was like, when was the last time? I mean, when I was a customer, I never rang my vendor and said, please cross-sell me some more.
For sure.
It was never a conversation.
What else you got on the truck? I'm just kind of curious. I'm window shopping today, and I've got some budget.
Now those things do happen, but in general, what I wanted from my customer success team was an honest, trusted advisor that I could talk to and say, hey, we're thinking of, we just run into this. Help us with, we've got a goal of optimizing. I need somebody who is largely impartial and has my best interests in heart as a customer to help me. And that's how you said, if you show up together. And so we're changing the way we build those relationships, the way we build those teams. We're making much, much more technical investment in our customer success teams to make sure.
So it's funny. Your founder wrote one of my favorite books, How to Castrate a Bull.
Yes.
It's one of my favorite books by a tech leader. And it really starts from the perspective of the thing we built was to solve the biggest challenge we saw in the space. Mm-hmm. No one thought about what the customer needed when it came to sharing storage. And so we built a thing that was really specifically designed to solve that problem. And what you just said is right back to that same problem. So I have one final question because we are out of time. And the final question is, if you could give customers listening one bit of advice on how they should approach this and think about this, knowing that this is a new paradigm in how I shop, how I buy, how I procure, and how I consume, what would that be?
That's a long answer. Let me. I would say it comes back to the why. One of the things I find is that we don't spend enough time in a discussion as partners really understanding what success looks like and what is a good outcome for you as a customer. Why are you trying to do this? Very quickly it devolves into features and product and widgets and
technology for technology's sake. And
it does become that. It does become that because of the way people are driven. You just put down, oh, well, what about this and how does that? One of the great examples right now, we spend a lot of time talking to customers about ransomware.
Yeah.
And just how some of the stories we're hearing now, it's becoming really quite terrifying how sophisticated these attacks are. And it's almost back to how are we going to protect the business? The data is this really critical asset. But I look at it, everybody, it's a great example of this because everybody focuses on making sure that their backups are good. And that's what you get paid to do, but you get measured on the restores.
Yeah.
And when you sit down and have that why conversation, the conversation is I really need to be able to make sure my business is available 24/7, 365. If something bad happens, I can recover in an hour. because we're going to lose $1 million a day. You know, whatever we can build that why statement. But too often people focus on the problem in front, which means that we're losing the bigger picture that we're trying to get to. And I think there's plenty of people who've done more eloquent discussions on the why, and you know, you can go look them up. But I think it's a really it's not focused on enough in any of the conversations that people tend to have.
I agree. Well, this has been fantastic.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Again, this is Howard Holton, and this has been another episode of Discovering Disruptions in Tech. Please like, share, subscribe, follow, and we'll see you on our next episode.